Hello, friends. Welcome back to Notes in the Margins with Dr. Karen McGregor. I am Dr. Karen McGregor, and on this channel, I like to take what I'm reading, learning, experiencing, and translate that to the lives of adult learners and higher education. And today, we have a bonus video for you. I'm taking a break from the book that I'm going through, and I'm going to walk you through the McGregor Context Lens. I reference this all the time or make tiny little references to it. And so just kind of having you an opportunity to give you some context, pun intended, for what I'm talking about and how I look at things. Because if you're going to follow my work, this is the lens I'm using to see students. It'll help you kind of decode some of the things that I'm thinking about and what I'm looking for when I'm talking about students. So I reference it frequently, as I tell you, and it shapes how I think, how I decision, and how I support students. And this is basically a representation of how I visualize the lives of students, what to dig in for, and what to look around at. It's not just a framework, it's how I make sense of what students are navigating. I use the word lens for my framework because it's not a checklist or a model you can follow step by step. I think of it as a way of seeing, interpreting, and helps you notice the patterns, the pressure points, and the opportunities for intervention in the lives of our students. A lens doesn't really tell you what to do, it helps you see what really matters. Before I go into the lens, I want to talk through some of its theoretical roots. It started with Yuri Bronfenbrenner. He, in 1979, developed the ecology of human development. And then later on in 2006, Bronfenbrenner and Morris fully articulated the PPCT model. The PPCT model is person, process, context, time. And it originally focused on human development, specifically early childhood development. At its core, this model was developed to understand how people develop within their environments. I like this model and used the entire PPCT framework to support my doctoral research, building on the other applications of Bronfenbrenner's work. Renn, 2003, used this framework to study racial identity. Renn and Arnold applied it to peer culture at a university, and Murphy used it to understand student engagement in community colleges in 2010. My adaptation and my contribution for this is that I've adopted and adapted the context lens to really focus on the lives of adult learners and higher education. So what has changed is how I label it, how I focus it, and really focusing on the third ring, which we'll get into, how I've applied it. And so this evolution has come to the McGregor context lens, is what I've been calling it. The roots are still there, but the way that I have applied it has evolved. So now you'll see joining me on the screen a visual representation of the framework that I use. In this, you'll see an individual, quite literally, in the center of the model. So, when people talk about a student-centered model, I can say, check, this is that. Where you have different rings emanating out from them. This represents the lives in which they're living and the world in which they're navigating. So I'm going to dig into each one of these rings and layers as we go. But right now, let's just focus on that individual in the center. I really want to center adult learners, online learners, and the complex lives that they're living. And we know that students are balancing work, family, and responsibilities. But when you look at this individual, you see all of the things in their head. Every student is coming to us with different abilities, a different educational background, and different sort of life circumstances. And so, as a reminder of that, I put a broken heart in this person because one of the people that I studied during my dissertation was somebody who was returning to school after a divorce. And so she was both working on that and, getting back into the swing of things as a student. And so this is just a visual reminder that everybody comes to us from a different set of circumstances. So now we've zoomed into the inner rings of the model. And so you still have that individual at the center, and then emanating out from them now are these responsibility bubbles. And I call these responsibility spheres, but each one of these bubbles represents a different identity and a different maybe place and space in the student's life and in their bandwidth. So this one, we have student responsibilities, work responsibilities, family or caretaker responsibilities, and every student's going to have a different set of circumstances, and maybe that these bubbles are going to be different sizes depending on the student and what they're dealing with. And so really kind of thinking about what they're doing kind of individually is important, but also thinking about how these elements can create a multiplier effect. When things are going well, it feels like your life might be in harmony. So for example, if you're doing really well in your classes, things are humming along at work, you have a great support network, and so there's somebody to take care of some of your family tasks, you're going to have a really strong base and a really strong foundation in which to be a student from. But sometimes there's a multiplier effect when things kind of go out of harmony. It's really hard to get back on track. And so in a recent video, I talked about how I was simultaneously going to PT for a hip injury and case managing my auto body repair experience. So during that time, there probably was a lot more things kind of going around and floating around in my head. And there were probably, you would probably, if you were looking at my life there in this time, you would have seen that my inner rings were not in harmony. So now we've zoomed back out and we're looking at the full context lens, but I want us to focus now on the outer rings. The outermost ring I call like the society ring. And so this is really like the world in which we are living in. And so this would be elements like traditional who goes to college, gender roles, different things like that, cultural expectations. These are the types of things that are just sort of like the lay of the land and the rules and how we operate. And this is the ring that students may have the least control over, but sometimes it can bring in the most turmoil. Things that are happening in the economy can, of course, affect the things that are going on in the inner spheres. For example, some students, the economy might shrink, and so a student might get laid off. That might bring them back to college, or they might be doing well, and so then they have a job benefit that brings them back to school. And so kind of thinking about the relationship between the inner and outer rings is important. Then I look at that third ring. The third ring is my favorite. It represents in my model higher education, and this is the ring that we as individuals working in higher education have the most control over. We have the power to look at our transfer policies and advising practices and make sure that they'll promote harmony in the inner rings for our students. And so this is really our responsibility in our sphere, in our realm. And so it's really important to kind of focus in on what can we do to support our students in that third ring. So this is my favorite depiction of the framework, in that it sort of is like the culminating thesis of like when I talk about the framework. What this represents here is we have some symbols of harmony in the inner rings, and then we have these like this path that the student is navigating in the outer rings. And so I would say our ultimate goal in higher education is to use this lens to promote harmony in the inner rings while simultaneously helping students navigate the outer rings. Now, this kind of can go and transfer to all of higher education. It applies beyond adult learners and is especially relevant for grad students, adult undergraduate students, non-traditional population, and even in traditional four-year settings. Even in the traditional spaces, more students are living multidimensional lives than earlier. So I believe that it can be used to help identify friction, understand drift, and better support students. And it also really connects to our hospitality, our belonging, and the student experience. When you see the full context, your approach to support has the ability to change. So there you have it. That is the primary foundation of the work that I do. It shows up across my work, and you'll hear me reference it in various videos, including the Unreasonable Hospitality series and my student success strategy, and more to come. And so if we want to see better outcomes, we need to start seeing students more fully. And so I have a margin question for you all. How might seeing students in this way shift the way you show up in your role? I'd love for you to, connect this work to what you're doing as well and tell me, is this useful? put that in the comments. Please like and subscribe. If you think this is a good way of looking at students, feel free to share this video with people that you work with. And I'll see you in the margins.